Okay, welcome everyone to our first webinar preparation for this skirmish in Brookfield. We're super happy you're planning to join us, and as we said, we want to make sure this is the best possible experience for some newer teams. So we've got this series of workshops coming up each Thursday evening. The intent is to do just about five of those with a quick topic, just to get you ready with some of the longer lead items first, and as part of that, uh, to share to share some resources along the way that might be helpful for you, and also to have a chance to do some questions and answers. So Vida Hay is with us this evening. She's one of our more senior team members on the Gearheads. I'm Tim Newstead. I'm one of the team coaches. I think we had Coach Rishi has joined us too just a couple of minutes ago. And do we have any other of the Gearhead team members on tonight?
I'm here, Aryev.
Aryev, thank you for joining. Aryev's a newer team member for us. He's coming up to speed super quickly this season, has had some prior FTC experience. So, all right. So the team is here and some of the coaches to answer some of your questions. So, does that work for anybody or any other questions as we get started here? We'll do about 15 or 20 minutes of Ida Hayes' presentation. We'll go fairly rapidly there and then leave some time for questions and answers. And we'll follow up with some email, which is uh, a recording of this meeting, and also some notes for resources for you.
Okay, perfect. Hello everyone. I'm Vaidehi and I'm one of the team members on Gearheads. I've been in FTC for the past 4 years, and so today I'll be talking more about the engineering portfolio. So, when the judges are judging a team, there are many important components, as you can see in the picture to the right. So some of those are the judging interviews, the pit interviews, and many others. But one of the most important factors is your engineering portfolio. So, what is your portfolio? Essentially, you can think of it as the resume of your team or how you represent yourself in your writing. So, it should be a concise summary of your team's journey, and this should include mainly your goals for the year, your accomplishments in outreach, in technical and non-technical aspects, and many other things. And the important part of this is to demonstrate your thoughts and your work in each of the award categories. So, in terms of the portfolio, there are many guidelines to follow, and some of these guidelines are ones that are required by FIRST, and there are some which are suggested. So, I'm going to start off by just talking about the ones that are explicitly mentioned in the game manual, because it's important to make sure that you're following the required criteria first. So first of all, the content that you're allowed for the engineering portfolio is 15 pages. And this is just the content itself. And with that, you can have a cover page. So the cover page is important because it'll be used by the judges to identify your team. So you should make sure to have your team number and the cover page with your portfolio. Next, it's important to make sure your font is large enough for the judges to see. So make sure to carefully consider your size, color, and the font size should be at least a size of 10 to make sure that the judges are actually able to read what you submit. You're able to use AI and other research aids. And finally, the portfolio, the most important part is that it should be able to capture your progression well throughout the season.
All right, good. And do you mind if I make one comment as we transition
Yeah.
pages? Hey, I will, as someone who has some judging experience as well, don't ignore the basics here. We see many teams walk in with portfolios that don't have a cover page, portfolios that aren't stapled together. I just follow the basics there and realize this is the document that the document the judges are going to use to understand your team's effort. And make sure you bring paper copies with you. There is a trend to electronically distribute them right now. The judges may or may not have good access to those electronic copies, so I would say bring a couple of copies for the meet. Um, bring a copy to the judging session, your in-person judging session, and hand it to the judges. Everything you can do to just make sure that's accessible and easy to understand by the judges is really a good idea.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Vadi.
Yeah. As Mr. Newstead said, I think that this is kind of also a reflection of your team. So making sure, yeah, so the first point in this is to organize your portfolio clearly, make sure that you're showing the judges that you've put effort in this, And so this is by making it aesthetically pleasing and making sure that your content is like nicely arranged. So following that, I think your formatting and your branding should be pretty consistent. So make sure that there isn't much of a design variance between slides. I think one of the most important parts is less is more. So when you think about it, these judges are looking at so many teams, they're reading so many portfolios that if you put like paragraphs of text, they're going to lose interest pretty easily. So what you should do is to make sure that you're not putting these large blocks of text and you're only putting the important aspects. So you can do this by bolding or highlighting the important parts, putting tons of images, and just making sure that there isn't much text.
Georgia.
And next, as I mentioned earlier, just making sure your team number is on the cover page. And so just to give an overview, the three broad categories that need to be in the portfolio are your team's information and technical and non-technical information. Okay, so as I said earlier, it's important to make sure that you aren't including too much text in your slides. So along these lines, I think that it's very important to put as many pictures and visual aids as possible in your slides. So to do that, there are some important steps that you should do during meetings and events to make sure that you have enough pictures. So take photos at any outreach events. That's really important to show supporting documentation in your portfolio. So any images of brainstorming ideas or processes during your team meetings, keeping track of incoming and outgoing funds. So that would be like for any budgeting plans or anything along those lines. Keeping track of any organizational tools used, such as anything you might have used at the beginning of the season to delegate tasks. And also to just keep track of the key numbers, like the number of hours volunteered or the impact you made. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into the award categories. So essentially, the main aspects of the engineering portfolio is demonstrating your work in each of these awards. So like the Think Award, the Control, the Innovate Award. And so for each of these, there are some things that are required in the engineering portfolio, but there are other things that can make it more stand out. So I'm just going to start with the Think Award. So for this award, you have to include at least one of the following. And for this award, the main idea is to make sure that you're letting the judges know that you use some sort of engineering process. So that would be either showing the engineering process, talking about the lessons you learned, or making sure you show that you did some sort of a trade-off analysis. One slide back, Mr.
I'm sorry about that. All right.
Yeah. So the engineering process is the required part, but for the suggested part, it's important to make sure that you also include information about your technical resources. So that would be like how you get these technical mentors, how you learn from them, and the team's development plan for new members to learn some of these technical skills. So that is one thing that can make you stand out from other teams by including this information. And as I mentioned earlier, just making sure that it's clear and intuitive is actually an important part. Okay, next is the Connect Award. So the team should have the team goals for the development of team member skills. So this can be like goals in terms of outreach skill development or different mechanical skill development, and also describing in depth the steps that the team took or will take to achieve these goals. Additionally, along with this, it's suggested that you include examples of developing in-person or virtual connections. So that would be examples of like mentioning different outreach, different people you reached out for outreach help, different mentors you had in the technical community. Maybe you did tours with the company. So making sure to like highlight that information. And also providing how this is how your team is engaging with the engineering community. So next is the Motivate Award. So this award does have some overlap with Connect award, but there's some differentiating factors. So for this, the main factor is just showing that you have an organizational plan. So this would mean that you show your team's goals. So this could be individual goals or overall goals, or show some kind of a timeline. So show some of your main goals and then showing like, oh, we want to do this at this time or some other event at another time. Or you could also show the financial sustainability plan. So that's where, for example, taking pictures of different budgeting or different grants would be important. And also to describe the individual contributions of team members and giving examples of how this led to success. So something that can set you apart for the Motivate Award is giving very specific examples of how you're an ambassador for FIRST programs. So this could be examples of stories of showing how you successfully recruited people who are not already active in the STEM community. So this is a differentiating factor from the Connect Award. Also just reflecting on some of the lessons learned from different outreach activities and showing how your team marketed itself and marketed first. Okay, now this is more of the technical aspects that you would include. So for the Innovate Award, you're mainly talking about the robot. So the required aspects are documenting examples of the team's engineering content and just showing the entire process of how you arrived at the design solution. So this would be just mentioning your different ideas, different iterations, and such. Next, just talking about how your robot or design is unique, and talking about that differentiating factor. And finally, just talking about how it's stable, robust, and how it contributes to the game objectives. Something that's suggested is talking about how you had additional risks and how you took care of those different risks. Now, the control award is software oriented. So what the portfolio needs to include is talking about the different software components on the robot, what challenges those components were intended to solve, and how each system works. And so the robot must use one or more of these solutions. And you also need to talk about how it improved the robot functionality. So what is suggested is that the team should document how the solutions consider their reliability, or identify how the solution could be improved. And as mentioned earlier, kind of talking about how they use the engineering process to develop these different solutions, specifically for the control award. Okay, and then the design award is similarly used to talk about how the robot is elegant, efficient, and practical to maintain. And you also need to have a good and detailed process on how to develop the design and not just a single component. So this should not be vague. It should be pretty detailed, guiding the judges through all the steps. And then what is suggested is you can talk about how your robot is distinguished in terms of its design. You can talk about the different inspirations that your team had in terms of the function. And you can also talk about how it's effective and consistent with your team strategy. Okay, so that was a lot of information, but those are the main categories in terms of talking about your team itself, goals and plans, talking about your outreach aspects, and talking about some of the more technical aspects. So that was a broad overview of some of the required things in the engineering portfolio and some of the things you can do to make your team more successful. But the following links contain more information about tips for formatting your engineering portfolio and content-wise. And okay, so this checklist was made by our team, and it basically just lists out the required information for each of the award requirements. So what you can do is it'll be sent to you later, but you can just use this checklist to kind of check off each of the points to make sure that everything's is included that's required in the portfolio. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
good. No, Vida, hey, thank you for walking through that. And as she mentioned, we started with this the engineering portfolio in this first webinar because you need a little bit of time during your lead up to the event to gather the information, take pictures, make sure you know it. And this is really the engineering portfolio, as Vida mentioned, is the main tool that you're using to communicate to judges the information that they need for these awards. And as she said, that can be a little bit daunting sometimes. But one thing that Vita has also put together is an example portfolio template. So this would be one format that you could use to meet the requirements that we just talked about um, just now. This isn't a required template. It's just one that we could suggest that may work that would provide some good structure and, that does hit most of the elements that Vitahay talked about. So Vitahay, I'll go to full screen mode. And then if you would like, we can have you just go through this quickly and kind of highlight what's on each page. You've only got 15 pages and a cover page in your engineering portfolio. So you do have to be a little careful about how that works.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. So I'll just go through this quickly so we have time for questions. But yeah, as Mr. Newstead said, it's kind of important to delegate slides to these different awards. So I think this template does a pretty good job of that. So first, starting off with your team, qualifier name, qualifier date, just a simple cover page. We are, so put your team name, talking about your team, its involvement in first. You could be like, oh, we're like a second year team, a first year team, or such. And then just give an overview of your goals. So this should not be super in depth. It can just be like broadly, like in technical, we had this goal, non-technical, this goal, and team composition. And make sure you have a lot of pictures. So then you can talk about your team plans. This is just a simple like 4-part.
Oh, I think you hit your mute button, Friday. There you
Yeah.
go.
Oh, sorry about that. So this is just a simple 4-part team goal structure. So it would be your team goals, organization, community outreach, and sustainability. So I think this hits most of the topics for that. Engineering design process. So just give your process and your design goals that you met with that. Key design changes and iteration. Again, that would just be dependent on your robot and what iterations you made. So this would be like your various subsystems and mechanisms in your robot. So again, going more in depth with the design process.
Mhm.
This would be highlighting your key innovations. So again, what is the uniqueness factor for your robot? So design and build. So again, repeating what your design strategy is, talking about any capabilities, and the use of CAD-based design. Next, this would be the control award. So talking about your software design and build similarly, and any highlights. This page would be to specifically talk about the different sensors and your strategy. And then this slide is just dedicated to talking about like the underlying math and science. This is actually pretty important to just demonstrate the different techniques mathematically and scientifically that you used with your robot design. This is the Connect Award. So this would be like specifying the industry experts. So if you can see what our team did was like, we put 3 broad categories of technical, outreach, and first connections. Sharing first with the community, this would be more of like the Motivate Award. So this would be like advocacy efforts, sharing the brand, etc. The impact made. So this would be any examples of like outreach events. And then this would be like your flagship outreach, so that one main impactful outreach you did. So for this, you want to go really in depth with the problem statement and solutions, your process, your planning and learning, and your impact. And you would, if you have another outreach, you would do the same thing for this one. So yeah, if you can see also in the template that we gave, it was pretty fluid in the sense that first you started off with your team goals, then you hit your mechanical and software elements, which is technical, and then you transition into the non-technical elements, which is like motivate and connect award. So it all just kind of flows well together.
Okay, awesome. So thank you for putting that template together, Vitahay, with the team and for
Yeah, of
sharing the
course.
information about it. And again, not something, it's just we know that the organization of the portfolio can be a little daunting when you first start out. And just as Vitahay mentioned, you've got to tell a story, keep it simple and engaging, but also give evidence to say, yes, we really did this work. So this is a format that you can start with, not one that you have to use entirely. There's no prescription for that, but it might be one that is a good starting point that you could say, hey, you can emphasize other parts and use this as you would like. Okay, good. I'm going to stop sharing. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes for questions just so I can see the participants. You can feel free to unmute, raise your hand. I think you can do that in the tool as well, or type anything in the chat window and we'll watch that. So any questions for the team as we start out?
I have two questions. David Baylor from Op Prep High School.
Oh, hi, David.
Hi. The first question is the cover page included in the count of 15?
So the cover page is technically not included because it's not considered the content. So you can have 15 of your individual pages, which cover the different like awards, and then you can just have your cover page. So no, it's not included.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Second question, there was a talk about the funding. Our students are not allowed to fundraise. We're funded completely through a private corporation who does not want totals
Mhm.
released to the public. So can that be omitted?
It can be, David, and perhaps one way to do that is to state your budget. What you really need to do for the awards is to show that you had a plan for the budget and that you have some execution around that. So you could even go, divide your projected budget up into categories. This much on the robot, this much for these outreach categories, and perhaps even express it, as a percentage of your budget or something like that. So, keeping with your funding partner to say, hey, this is where it comes from, and we're respecting that, but showing that you did have a little bit of a plan. That might be a way around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Mhm. Good questions. Anything else from any of the other teams or any of our participants?
Okay, I'll throw a third question in.
Sure.
Is there any willingness on any of the team members that we could send them a rough draft of our portfolio for major advice before we put all the work into fine tuning it?
I'll pause and let Vitahay or the team answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. We would love to help with that. If you have any questions or any doubts, please feel free to contact us. And yeah, we'd love to take a look and give you any feedback. Just let us know when you would like to do that.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned doing that earlier, David, before you're done. It gets difficult if 2 days beforehand we do a review and we say, hey, oh my gosh, do something different. But you're more than welcome to share drafts, and we'll engage the team in that. Absolutely.
So I think we got a question in the chat from Owen, which was, what is the most common mistake you see? Um, I think while I haven't personally
Hmm.
had obviously experience judging, I would say that a mistake that's made is just forgetting what the actual requirements are in the game manual. So this would be like having a font size less than 10 or just some of the basic things. I think that before you jump into the specifics or the suggested things, making sure that you have everything that's required is really important. So just going back to the manual and double checking that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good comment, Vitahay, and that's why the first part of this presentation was set up with awards, what the requirements are for each award. And there's a required section and sort of an optional section, right? So it's really important to take that checklist in that content and say, make sure this is somewhere in that presentation. Because if you don't have the required presentation, an element, no matter how strong it is, right? Like you may not have a really great design plan as your first year. It just might be we brainstormed and we built 3 iterations and we tested. That's okay. Um, and put that in there. But if you omit that section, if you don't talk about how your design plan was, you've automatically excluded yourself from a whole bunch of the awards because you don't have that content. So, irregardless of how strong it is. So, pay particular attention to the required content for each award. And even if it's not your strong point, make sure there's something in there about it so that you can be considered for the award because you would otherwise just be, the judges would say, hey, I'm sorry, that part is missing and I can't consider this team for the award. So don't leave elements out, just as Vaidehi said. Yeah,
Tim, can I add one more point to that?
please. Yeah, Rishi.
Yeah. So typically, and Tim has judged more than I have, but typically the judges get no more than a few minutes to actually scan through the portfolios uh, before the judging actually commences. So the judges actually scan through them quickly to pick up the most important ideas, and they're looking at two things. Number one is what Tim mentioned: is are all the necessary suggested content elements there for award? And second, what are the key things that you want to highlight? And that is used by the judges typically for Q&A during that aids the conversation and the interviews during the judging side. So the first point whether he said less is more is a very important part. You want to 15 pages is not a whole lot. It's precious real estate. So trying to use that real estate to emphasize the best of your strengths that can be used in telling a formidable story would go the distance.
All right. Any other questions from folks on the call? Okay. Awesome. We're just about right at time. So thank you, Vaidehi, for leading us through that. The next webinar session next week, same time, same channel, we'll talk about the judging in the awards process, right? So this will give you some insights into kind of what's happening, as you show up to the qualifier and, what do you need to do? What are the judges doing with the information that you present at the judging session? And then how does that translate into the rest of the process for how awards are selected and given out during the events? And that is a little bit complicated, and it's really good to know the basics of it so you can understand kind of where your information is going, how these interactions with the judges are working, and then what it means when you win an award and sort of understand how that's working. Because there's some subtleties in that are really good to understand that can give you good feedback on your team. Okay. We'll follow that with 3 other sessions, one on just basics of making your robot work. What we've seen, teams make mistakes so the robots don't start up and don't make it through a match. How to function well as a team during a qualifier. The key message in that is that there's a job for everyone on your team during a qualifier event, and there's activities that everyone should be doing to represent your team well and make sure you perform your best. And then we'll wrap up with planning for a qualifier, which is just especially for the team members, what should you expect when you get there? What should I be packing? What should I be bringing? How does this work? What some logistics items are there to think about for both the coaches and the team members? So we look forward to those next sessions as well. We will send an email out tomorrow. You'll see a recording of the session on our YouTube channel, and you'll see links to these templates and documentations each week, so you can reference those and use those to hopefully make it a little bit simpler as you kind of come up to speed and get prepared for the event. Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up tonight? All right, awesome. We look forward to all of you I'm sorry. Yeah.
So the analysis, like cost benefit and mathematical, do those need to be on like all separate slides, or those can be on like a same slide and then just be sectioned off?
You can put them as long as that information is in there someplace and it fits in a story, it's fine. There's no requirement for a portfolio to be organized in a certain way, what's on what page. The cost benefit analysis is just all about trade-offs, realizing that, you're doing something on your robot, and why did you choose to do that first? Or, what was your limitations that prevented you from doing something? So you made a different choice for cost benefit. So, and the mathematics and science part of it doesn't have to be complicated. That can be something simple like, the trigonometry behind your robot. The arm needs to reach to this level and it's at this angle. So how long does it need to be? Calculating springs, anything like that, just to show that you're starting to develop, some thought and some engineering process behind your robot. And that's a chance to highlight. Maybe you've reached out to some people in the community as well, some technical advisors or folks in companies or even your own coaches, and said, hey, how do we learn about this? So, but no specific requirement for stuff being on a particular page or in a particular order in the portfolio. Okay.
Yeah, again, for us, we put the math as a separate slide, but that's just because that's something we wanted to prioritize, but that does not necessarily have to be the case for your team.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. One last round. Anything else as we wrap up? Okay, perfect. Again, thank you for the Gearheads for putting this together and a strong start. Vida, hey, thank you very much for taking ownership for this first content and leading our presentation tonight. And check your emails tomorrow for follow-up. All right,
Yep.
take
Thank
care
you
and have a good
everyone for
evening.
joining.
Bye now.